Now, you might think it didn't take very long to work out if something was fair or unfair, especially perhaps for the Office of Fair Trading. But for nearly 2.5 years, the OFT has been puzzling over the fairness of fees charged to leaseholders when they sell or rent a retirement home. The fee is typically a percentage of the value of the dwelling, but can amount to thousands of pounds. Campaigners call them a fine on selling or renting the property. We highlighted these problems on Moneybox when the OFT began its inquiries in 2009, but judging from emails and the claims of campaigners, the problem's as bad as ever. And Bob Howard's also been looking into this. Bob.
That's right, Paul. We've been contacted by Moneybox listener Sheila Williams, whose mother bought a leasehold retirement flat in East Sussex in 1999. It's managed by a company called Peverel, Britain's biggest manager of retirement homes. After her mum died 2 years ago, Sheila, as executor, tried to sell the flat, but there were no takers. And over the next 18 months, Sheila and her husband had to take out various loans to pay the service charge of more than £2,000 a year. So they decided to rent it instead. But Peverel charges a fee, known as an exit or transfer fee, equivalent to 1% of the flat's value every time a new tenant moves in. Sheila thinks it's not fair.
My mother knew the terms of the lease would be that she paid ground rent and she paid service charges. That's all part of it. But what you don't read is that there are extra charges, extra contingency and transfer fees. And it's like, why am I paying a transfer fee? I'm not transferring the property, I'm just letting the tenant in there.
Peverel refused to do an interview, but did send this statement.
We sympathise with Mrs Williams, but when buying a property, residents should be advised by their solicitor that when a property is sold or sublet, a contingency fee for the upkeep of the property is payable, and a transfer fee for the landlord is also payable under the terms of the lease. This is usually 1% of the sale price.
Sheila's story is a familiar one to Melissa Briggs, who set up the campaign against retirement leasehold exploitation after her own experience.
My mother was 79 when she bought into a Peverel development. The lease was 150 pages long, and as it happens, after she died and I read it, I found that all the bad news was on page 149.
The Office of Fair Trading has told Moneybox it hopes to give an update on its investigation later in the spring. Until then, Melissa Briggs has this suggestion for those paying transfer fees.
My advice, if you do get charged it, is to pay it, because you have to, but when you pay it, you provide a legal letter provided by your solicitor that says very clearly, I have paid these fees under duress and I reserve the right to reclaim the money should the OFT investigation into unfair terms within the lease finds that exit fees are indeed unfair.
Well, that was Melissa Briggs, and thanks again for that, Bob. We're live now to talk to Tish Hannifan, a barrister and director of Solicitors for the Elderly. Tish Hannifan, we heard from Sheila earlier. She's paid thousands of pounds for what she considers to be very little. What can she do about that?
Well, I'm heartened to hear that she did make the very important point, Paul, that whatever you do, you really must pay any fees, such as the transfers fees. Unfortunately, listening to what the people have said on your show, the difficulty very often is that these leases are very complex. The devil, I'm afraid, is in the detail, and the ability for someone to actually take action against the lease. Yes, there are rights you have in law, but they're expensive, they're costly. The Office of Fair Trading's review really couldn't come soon enough. This is something that happens frequently, that solicitors that deal with older people find all the time. So certainly, first of all, it's very important to check the lease and make sure it's absolutely clear that under that term of the lease, whether or not that's an unfair contract term or not, the Office of Fair Trading will determine. But if it is, that they should pay it.
And what about Melissa Briggs' advice that you should pay it, but with a letter saying you'll want it back if the OFT eventually decides that these charges are unfair?
It's a good idea to reserve your position, and what she's saying there, she's making the point that she believes at this point she would have to pay it. Actually, her right to take action subsequently would be there whether she did that or not, but it is a very good idea to put that clearly in writing. It's always a good idea to put your concerns in writing.
And is there any way you could not pay it pending the OFT decision if you put it in a separate account and say, well, I'll let you have this money, but not until the OFT's told me that it's fair?
It wouldn't be very good advice to do that, and I would really suggest to your listeners that the law of leasehold and of property, leaseholds and freeholds, Paul, is quite different from other contractual matters. And so you would put yourself almost certainly in breach of the terms of the lease if you don't pay it to anyone other than a person it's supposed to be paid to.
Right. And what about people who are thinking of moving into one of these properties? They can seem very attractive. What precautions should they take now?
That I think there's a little bit more positive things you can say. The difficulty is that people are already in these leasehold situations, are in a position where they are bound by the terms of the lease, and it's quite difficult to extricate yourself from that. But if people are looking to move into a property, then I would say they can be very attractive. So what I would say is, first of all, make sure you get specialist legal advice. And by that, what I mean is this is a form of conveyancing, but ask if the solicitor has experience of these kind of retirement properties. And the other thing from that is,
briefly,
perhaps you just make sure that you get lifestyle-related advice. And by that, what I mean is not just a description of the legal terms, but what if my circumstances change? Right. What if I need to go into a care home?
Tish Hannifan of Solicitors for the Elderly. Good advice there, thanks.